how much they did at the intersection from the standpoint of police.
The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council meeting for April the 15th, 2014 is now in session. I'd ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is on the consent agenda is a Child Abuse Prevention Month proclamation. Have all of you read this?
Yes.
Is there any need to read it out again?
No.
Thank you. In that case, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion at all? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. General public comment. We have the same booming crowd we usually have, don't we?
Zero. Except you and I moved to the other side of the table.
Right, it's only different. Anybody, I'm sorry, old business? Any old business to discuss? If not, let's go on to the new business. This is the reason we're here this morning, I think, is it not? Discussion of the draft general operating budget, town manager and finance officer. Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Just one quick announcement today. Our videographer is Mr. Hopkins, standing in for our usual Eric. And Mr. Hopkins, with Eric, of course, works for WHRO in Hampton Roads. And we're privileged to have him here today to help us, I think. The draft budget that you have before you is exactly what I'm referring to it as a draft. The process that we're going through, of course, is these are the numbers that I have projected and are presenting to you today for a draft discussion. And then in 2 weeks at the May meeting, I will make the formal presentation of what I call the manager's budget or the proposed budget that will be accompanied by a budget message at that time. Today, again, this is a draft, but we are seeking direction. If there are any changes that council would like to propose by consensus, I will certainly make those changes as long as the council directs me through consensus today. And then when we come in May, of course, council can continue to make its own changes to the budget through its actions. One comment, this is a balanced budget today that I am presenting you in draft form. It calls for no tax increase, and it calls for no draw from the capital from the undesignated fund balance. So what that means, of course, is if there are any changes that council would like to propose in the form of a consensus to me today, we do need to find the money on the other side of the column if we make changes on one side of the column. So that would be either in the form of a revenue increase or in the form of an adjustment to another expense to take the place of the expense we're adjusting. So I'd appreciate it if you would help us in that respect as well, so we can kind of think along at the same time together what we need to, if you would like to adjust something as a council, we need to adjust something on another column as well, since it is balanced and calls for no property tax increase and no draw from the designated fund balance. I did not include in this year's draft a contingency line overall. I think we discussed this last year and possibly the year before. Other municipalities nearby actually put a contingency line in their budget so that if there are things that do pop up during the year, There is no formal action to draw from undesignated fund balance if we have to. I did not do that again this year, but I think next year will probably be the time that we need to seriously discuss doing that. By state law, even if we draw from the contingency line, the council would need to approve that during the year. But it is just a method for you to budget a contingency line rather than have to go back to undesignated fund balance if we had to for any depleted line during the year. As we go through the revenues in the beginning, you'll also see the distribution taxes, occupancy, land transfer, and sales, and I'll explain those when we get there. But basically, the effect from Southern Shores not having a tax increase last year, and for other towns now having tax increases to pay for 3 beach nourishment projects, the distribution formula came out such that Southern Shores was down about ½ penny in its ad valorem tax revenue. So a little bit over $60,000 is what was adjusted downward from our typical revenue because of the formula for the distribution taxes. So I think that's an ongoing process that we chase that tail of the rabbit each year to watch that, and that's what the effect was from this past year. So you'll see that when we go through it. What I'd like to do today is start out with the summary and the revenues, and then if I could go through the departmental budgets in a little bit different order than what's in the budget. I've asked the police department, police chief to come up first, and then we'll go through his expense budget, and then code enforcement and permits, I'll ask Mr. Haskett to come up, and then public works next, along with her various budgets, Ms. Patrick, and then we'll do admin last with the actual other funds, if it's okay. I think that way we can preserve our time a little bit better. Starting out on page 1 then of the actual draft is the general fund summary. And you can see that we start out under revenues with ad valorem taxes. The ad valorem taxes were adjusted downward slightly because of the adjustments made by the county after revaluation. So you can see that the projected ad valorem taxes are $2.8 million. And I just want to call your attention again that when we talk about rate and me paying my taxes or a citizen paying his taxes, that's what that's about, and that represents about half of the town budget. So the taxes being paid and the resulting ad valorem is not the full amount of the town budget. That's something I've tried to get across through education over the last 3 or 4 years, so it really represents about half of the town's actual budget. And you'll see other revenues at 2.9 on the second line, being a total of revenues of 5.8 million. The next line down, again, confirming there is no proposal to draft from the undesignated fund balance to balance this budget. And we do project a transfer in from capital reserve fund, the remaining balance from last year that can be used. There is a balance in there in that fund that represents some designated items, but for streets, that $36,542 is, I propose drafting that in from the capital reserve fund, and that of course goes back into streets. So that would make a total revenues of $5.852208, and that would be our total revenues coming in for the town for the year. The summary for expenditures, and we'll go over these line by line as we start, but basically you can see the administrative department next, code enforcement department, police department, public works department, our streets, bridges, and canals, sanitation services, fire contracted services, and our ocean rescue contracted services, all in those total projected amounts of expenditures for the year, totaling $5,832,208. So that would, together with a transfer out to capital reserve fund, as we've previously discussed, for canals, meaning $10,000 fund, $10,000 to go into capital reserve fund for canal preservation, conservation and $10,000 to go into the capital reserve fund for outside channel conservation and preservation of $20,000 would balance the budget at $5,852,208. So you can see that that does balance. And again, with we're using $36,000 of capital reserve fund money, which would go back towards streets, but no money being projected coming in from undesignated fund balance and no property tax increase. Moving ahead on page 2, we break out the revenues more on page 2 and 3. Again, the ad valorem taxes, this column, are we on page 2 on the screen? Okay. Ad valorem taxes, again, current year, you can see the 2.8 or 2.790599. And then you've got the various line items representing previous years and the vehicle taxes, penalties, and interest, meaning a total ad valorem taxes of 2.850099. Next, we get to the occupancy, sales tax, and land transfer tax. And I'll call your attention to last year's column there, the FY 13-14 amended, as compared to our column of the FY 14-15 requested. And you can see the slight reductions from $900,000 to $852 in occupancy tax, the reduction of local option sales tax from $814,985 to $804,695, and the reduction in land transfer of $201,625 to $198,625. This is a direct result of the statutory formula for distribution of these taxes based on the formula that the county has to use. Yes, yes, sir. And that's what the half, a little over $62,000, I believe. So the total occupancy, land transfer, and sales tax is $1.855320. In the other revenues, you can see our typical annual revenues of unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, the utility franchise tax, a slight increase, video programming tax, a slight decrease, telecommunications tax is flat, the PEG channel revenue is flat, ABC revenues, they're all flat, beer and wine tax are flat, and solid waste disposal tax is flat. That total $334,300. And then the restricted intergovernmental revenues, the Powell bill money, it's a slight increase for this year, projected at $118. Those are DOT numbers, I believe. The next two lines will be described in a minute as well in the police department. These are two grants, Governor's Crime Commission and the GHSP grant. And the percentages on those are the GHSP grant is 75-25, so that revenue represents 75% of the total grant. And the next one represents as well 75% of the total grant. And you can see, we'll go over those expense lines in a minute when we get to the police department, but those are the incomes projected from those two grants. The next line shows the government access channel grant, and this is a reflection of the budget amendment that council performed last meeting. Projection of $20,000 grant for next fiscal year. Of course, this year was a part of that budget amendment as well that council performed, and we're well underway with those expenditures now for the audio visual for this room, and that's what this money will be used for. Shoreline management. You can see there is a drastic difference on last year and this year. Last year's revenue reflected all of the town of Southern Shore's piggy bank in that account with the county. We had to actually pay out all our account from last year and basically start over under the new policy of spending the money each year. So each year is projected we'll get $24,000, and it has to be spent during the year. We can't bankroll it like we have in years past. So rejection of $24,000 for this year on shoreline management. Again, we propose to use those funds for the same type program, beach protection, so to speak.
Dune stabilization.
Dune stabilization, fertilization and plantings, and to keep our standard policy now of homeowners being encouraged to put up their own sand fencing, and we come behind with the stabilization measures. The next line is the projected revenue from the Federal Highway Administration through DOT for the fiscal year of $400,000. Now, this figure was calculated based on our discussions with our engineer and DOT about how far along we feel like they may be during the next fiscal year with the bridge, the replacement bridge at Tall Pine. Recall, this is the federal municipal bridge replacement program. It is a 80-20 match. So there will be an expense line in a minute that will show you in one of Ms. Patrick's budgets. But this reflects the revenue that we project towards that expenditure. This may change during the year. Hopefully it would change if they sped up with the project. We could come back in and say we need to increase this. But right now, that's what we project. It's what the amount of work and the draw on the grant would be during the fiscal year.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
If we don't get as much done this year, does this slide over to another year then?
Well, this would, because we would not have gotten this amount. This is a reimbursement grant anyway.
Reimburse, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have gotten the money anyway. It would just essentially, we'd rebudget the revenue for the next year.
So we're assuming we're gonna get X percentage of the work accomplished this year, that reflects that.
That's correct. And assumption being the key word, I guess, is what we've done here. We're assuming that they're gonna do that amount of work for this year. If they don't, we'll just rebudget it for next year.
I wanna drop back one line
Sure.
on the shoreline management.
Mm-hmm.
In conversations with some of the other communities, I'm finding they're having some difficulty with homeowners placing their own sand fence. And sometimes they're putting on the dunes, so it creates more problems than it solves. And if we monitor that in any way, do we have any way of making sure they put the sand fence where it should go? We just trust them.
We do, and when Mr. Haskett comes up to talk about his departmental budget, we can go into detail, but yes, we do monitor that, and we have actually enforced a couple of those during this past year and actually had them reposition fencing, but they have to comply with coastal management rules when they put the fencing up. Has to allow for sea turtle passage, et cetera, and have, ingress and egress through the sand fencing, has to be set back, that sort of thing, and we have enforced on a couple of occasions ourselves.
That's my question. Thank you.
When they put the fence up, have to seek a CAMA permit for the concept.
Yes.
So they,
Minor permit.
Minor permit.
I mean, they were,
And I'll ask Wes if he wants to comment on that right now.
It's an exemption, they don't have to be issued a permit, they can pursue a letter of exemption.
they don't have to present any. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, that there is, they just don't go out and put it up. Somebody, it triggers a monitoring process.
And I will say, we are notified pretty quickly if they're not correct. And so we have had to make some owner or request, and they have complied to make adjustments in that, but yes, sir.
Thank you.
The total restricted intergovernmental revenues there are 582,047 at the bottom of page 2. Excuse me. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one, let me back up on the bottom of page 2. The bike and pedestrian plan for the NCDOT grant. Finance officer, you can make a comment.
Yeah, we did not budget anything for that this coming year, but in speaking with Wes, he's not sure that the plan is going to be complete as of June 30. So we don't know at this point how much of that will be completed. So what will probably happen is it will roll forward and then we'll come for you as a budget amendment. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that we didn't put an amount in because we're not sure how far along they're going to be in the plan.
Is that a reimbursement grant as well?
Excuse me, yes, ma'am. 80/20.
Good.
Thank you.
With that, we'll shift to page 3, revenues from permits and fees. You can see there's a slight projected increase in building permits, still being conservative there. We're projecting $80,000. The plan review fees, we're showing flat. Reinspection fees, slight decrease. CAMA fees, a slight decrease. Planning board fees, showing flat. We're showing no revenue from encroachment agreement for this fiscal year. Court costs and fees, flat. Parking and parking fines are showing flat from last year for total revenues of $97,000 from permits and fees. The other revenues are as typical from years past. Interest income showing a decrease, projecting a decrease. From Charter Communications, franchise fee, flat. The other items there are projected for no revenues. Those are from years past, and we're keeping them on the budget there because you can see from years of 2 and 3 years ago for auditing purposes. Pet center rentals, showing the same. I believe miscellaneous revenues, Bonnie, can you help with that? Explain that.
Yeah, well, miscellaneous revenues basically are things that we get that are not projected at the beginning of the fiscal year. So this number more reflects as to where we actually are for this current year. So that's why the decrease there. So we're actually closer to the 7,500, I think, was where we're going to end for the current 13-14 fiscal year.
What's an example of miscellaneous? Just using this current year, what would be one of them?
Miscellaneous, comes in sometimes, like if, I don't know, something right off the top of my head would be,
Something like gifts to the town, or that,
well, donations, if they give something that's, for the police department, we do, it normally does go in the miscellaneous line unless it's specifically like this year for the AEDs. Then remember we did the budget amendment to increase it so the police department directly benefited from that. Let's see, miscellaneous. I mean, sometimes we get I can't even recall anything off the top of my head to be honest with you, but it's things that are not projected. Sometimes we get if someone has to reimburse us for something that, say they ordered too many, or just wacky stuff that is not normally within the budget.
On the next line to give an explanation.
Yes.
We do this each year.
On the next line for the lease proceeds, the $180,000, if you remember when we did the budget amendment for the bridge, we said that it was an accounting procedure that had to be done. We showed the 106, 806 in the expense line, and we had to show that in the lease proceeds line to satisfy auditing requirements. So basically the 106, 806 that was in lease proceeds is the difference of what we actually budgeted for the cost and when we got the real cost of the bridge. Because originally we budgeted $255,000. Then when we got the actual cost of the bridge, we had to show the difference in lease proceeds and show it in our expense line. That was an auditing requirement for the books to show the total cost. So that's why it looks like we have a decrease, because normally what goes in that line is our vehicle lease money.
That would bring the total other revenues then $96,900 projected for the year, and then total other revenues from this sheet and the previous sheet of $2,965,567.
Bonnie, what about the leases along the canals?
Yeah, those
Is that
are
in that line?
bulkhead leases.
Yeah.
And I think, do you normally put those in here, but I might have those under, yeah, miscellaneous, because it's normally only $50 a year, because it's $5 per, right.
Okay.
So it's a
probably
minimal
miscellaneous,
amount.
yeah.
Mm-hmm, yes, ma'am.
Any other questions on revenues from the council? Projected revenues, excuse me. If not, we'll go on to expense budgets, and I'll call Chief Cole to come up and sit with me, and we'll go through his budget. If there are any questions, we can talk about those. And his budget starts on page 6.
Got it.
Okay. Now, one thing I did want to call the council's attention to, in the tabs of today's notebook, I've inserted an organizational chart for town employees, a vehicle chart listing all the town-owned vehicles, and also a list of the future street rebuilds, and we can refer to those throughout today's discussions. The first line that you see on each departmental budget is going to be salaries, and the succeeding lines will be associated with salaries or benefits. So the first 3 or 4 lines will always be dealing with salary and benefits. The projections that you see for each department reflect an actual employee that's on this, that represents a position on the organizational chart. So it's nothing is funded in here that's not an active employee. So if there's like a vacancy position somewhere in this budget, it's not reflected in salaries. We don't have it actually funded. So trying to keep it lean and mean, and that's the purpose of it. So to start out, on the police department, you'll see salaries. That represents what Chief Cole shows on his organizational chart is those positions, and I believe that's 11 positions plus money for a community resource officer, which is a seasonal worker. I think I'm saying that right. And what I'd like to do is I'll go through some major changes, and if council has questions on any line, Chief Cole was here, and between the chief and myself and the finance officer, we do have individual worksheets for each line on how we actually develop these numbers, so we can comment on each individual number and tell you what that represents, if that's what you'd like to hear.
Could I ask one question?
Yes,
first?
ma'am.
You mentioned 11 positions, but I thought I counted 12. Am I reading this wrong?
12, that's right.
So, okay,
Yeah, there's
So it's 11 excluding-
Excuse me.
fantastic.
That's right.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm correct me on that. Yeah. First line shows the salaries for the year, and recall during last fiscal year, the council made some adjustments to personnel for the police department, and those reflections are in that particular line. Also, the chief will be funding his 3rd sergeant's position come July 1. So you'll see a slight increase in the salaries to reflect that plan that council had actually previously approved, the previous council had approved for him, for that particular department. You can see a slight increase in holiday time. The overtime stays the same, and that was our goal, was to try to not increase any overtime based on the changes that he was making in his department for each shift, and he can answer questions regarding that. If I can go down and then we'll come back, it might be the easiest way to do it. You can see the other expenses out, of course, the Social Security, FICA, group health insurance, and employees' retirement. You have career development, computer services, printing, advertising, travel, dues and subscriptions, training, medical testing, uniforms for the department, supplies for the department, and contracted services. Now, I will comment on contracted services. What we have experienced last fiscal year is a challenge with maintenance of some of the notebooks, computers that are carried into police vehicles. Our IT provider provided us with service and maintenance last year that basically gratis on a lot of the time they spent on the computer notebooks. What we've done this year is gone through a study to see if we can project another way of doing this, another way of taking care of the maintenance on the police laptops that are carried into vehicles. Right now, though, we're projecting a $12,000 increase in maintenance fees to accommodate for those notebooks for the year. So that's the money that we will end up having to spend this year on maintaining the books that we basically got as a freebie last year on top of our current maintenance contract. So we'll be monitoring that throughout the year to see if there's another alternative. The chief and I have already looked at several alternatives, and we're discussing it with the IT provider name. But right now, in the worst case scenario, we project out having to pay somewhere around $12,000 maintenance cost to keep those notebooks on top of the line and keep them interfaced with the county communication system. And that seems to be the challenge, and it's not something that's just typical of Southern Shores. At least one of the other municipalities in town is experiencing some difficulty as well. The next item would be equipment leasing and maintenance. Equipment purchases, vehicle maintenance and repair, vehicle operations, which is actual fuel cost. Again, vehicle operations is fuel cost. We have a miscellaneous line, a debt service line. Bonnie, if you could go ahead and chime in on that line, and also the capital outlay for the vehicles again.
Okay, the debt service are the actual payments that we make for the vehicles that we lease. So the $75,500 is the actual payment for the 2 cars that we have on the leases prior year. The $74,000 is to offset in revenues that $74,000 in lease proceeds. So when the bank gives us the money, we then in turn write the company the check for the vehicles for $74,000. So you have to show it both ways. So you have to show the actual payment for the cars that we purchased in the past, and then the capital outlay vehicles are for this year. He's projecting to get 2.
I was just gonna say, so that means we're purchasing new cars?
2, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And why doesn't that impact the debt service piece? Does that not do that till
Because
next year?
we make annual payments, and since our budget is adopted in July, it's normally after that when the payments are due. So just like the debt service for the $75,500, you can see this year we paid $91,000 because we were paying 3 cars. So we actually got one of those paid for. So next year we're paying for 2. So that.
And that's the 2 old ones, not the 2 new ones?
Correct. That's correct. That's correct. Because of the time and we make an annual payment instead of monthly or that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the next 2 represent our cost of grants for radar trailer and for training equipment. And Bonnie, if you could comment on that again, because I want to make sure everybody understands the math that's used when you go back to the revenues.
For the $12,000 for the radar trailer, that is the GHSP grant under revenues, where we're anticipating 75% of that reimbursed to us, so that's the $9,000. And then the one for the training equipment is the GCC, or the Governor's Crime Control Grant. Same thing, the total cost of that is $14,729, and we're anticipating 75% reimbursed to us, so that's where those revenues are offsetting the expense.
And the lines on the expense side, the premise is those represent 100%.
Correct, because they're reimbursement grants.
So those are 100%.
So with the GSP, when the first one you talked about 12,000 is basically the 9,000 that's coming from the grant plus the 3,000 we would have to pay?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, and then, of course, the required separation allowance that has to be transferred to the pension fund for law enforcement officers is there as well at $17,000. So the total police department budget for projected for FY 14-15 is $1,471,484. And again, the chief's here, and Bonnie and I, we'll be glad to try to answer questions on individual lines. Let me back up as well. All salaries on these departmental budgets too reflect a projected 2.5 cost of living adjustment for the employees in the departments as well. And we'll make sure I was clear about that. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry about that. But we're going to do that at each departmental level.
These salaries reflect the community service officer, or is he shown somewhere else?
No, sir. He's included in the salaries as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of like 12 plus.
Correct.
Okay.
And before you begin, Chief, can you kind of brief them on where we are on the CRO for this year? I think there's some interest in that as well. The community resource officer, I believe you're seeking to hire somebody for this summer.
Yeah, what our goal is for this is obviously this position is a seasonal position. It frees up our officers to respond to and handle calls for service, while the community resource officer enforces all the beach etiquette, which is dogs on the beach, that type of stuff, conducts beach patrols 2 or 3 times during the shift. We rotate the shift around during the week, so he can hit different times, different days. And also, this position also enforces all of our local parking ordinances and those types of things. It's not to say that our officers aren't out issuing parking tickets too, but this is one specific detail that the community resource officer has to conduct. And what I try to do is hire someone that has an interest in law enforcement, that's either in college already or contemplating possibly going to the basic law enforcement training academy. We had a very good individual last year who may be interested in coming back this year. He is currently attending the basic law enforcement academy, and he's a local fella. The same one that worked here last year. And if he is successful in getting a police officer job, then obviously we'll be looking at somebody else. But that's our goal, is to try and find someone that has an interest in law enforcement.
Right now, we have no one, though. Right now, it's an open spot.
It's always a seasonal hire, so he
Right.
wouldn't hire anybody until,
Understand.
to start hopefully in the middle of next month is what we typically do each year.
We try to get him on board just before Memorial Day. That gives us a week or 2 just before that, just to kind of get the person acclimated, especially if they've never worked here before. And then we try to work through until usually the 1st or 2nd week in September, depending on how busy it continues to be.
I have a question with regards to the police cars. It seems like I've been on the council forever, and I know one of the subjects that often comes up are the police cars. And having set up this rotational, changing them out has certainly helped that issue. But I don't understand why we have 1, 2, 3 spare cars and another one that's shared. It seems like maybe we have more vehicles than we really need, so why do we keep them on the records?
Well, the spare cars, one of those spare cars is actually used for surveillance, undercover type stuff. The other spare car is an unmarked vehicle that we have the officers use when they have to go to Salenberg or Edneyville for training and service training and those types of things. And the third spare car, that is the car that we use when someone else's car is in the shop or out of service, those types of things.
How often do those things happen? I guess the question is to compare the cost of keeping them versus how much they're used.
Well,
I
what
see
you're
a lot of
looking
them
at,
sitting out there.
2 of the cars that you're looking at are spare cars are gonna be gone. as soon as we purchase the 2 new vehicles.
Yeah, but then you're replacing with 2 new ones.
That's correct.
So we still have 2 spares.
That's correct. I can give you an example. We have 2 cars in the shop right now, and now both spare cars are being utilized. It happens quite a bit, unfortunately.
And what does it mean shared? A Chevy pickup and all it says is shared.
That's a utility vehicle, plus we use that for a lot of our traffic enforcement and those types of things. So it's not specifically assigned to any in particular individual. The other use for one of those spare vehicles is the community resource officer. We put decals on that in the summertime, and they utilize that to do the parking enforcement.
It just seems we have an awful lot of vehicles. I've got some concerns about that, so I guess I'd ask Peter and you to take another look at it. Does that make sense to keep that many cars?
Yeah, we will continue to do that and try to, I think what we need to do, I know from a management part is as the chief mentioned, the surplus system. That's something we can try to
Yeah.
speed up as necessary when the time comes for each one, and that would take, hopefully, as you said, it puts them back on there for the new purchases, but it might also speed up at least administration and management of keeping the spares during the year.
Yeah, I think just we should take a look at it. It's a difficult one to try to explain if somebody asks us questions as to why we have that many. Thank you.
Along the vein of vehicles, the 2 new vehicles are cars or SUVs or one of each?
This year, we're gonna be purchasing a 4-wheel drive marked unit, because we don't have one right now. We just got rid of the last Durango. And then another one will be a vehicle of some sort.
I was curious about that because I saw the Durango on the list.
Yeah.
Question I got is, said we had 2 vehicles in the shop now. What's the reliability of the different makes or ages?
Well, you don't have an awful lot of options out there right now. The Crown Vics were a heck of a car. They don't make them anymore. And the new replacement vehicle is pretty expensive. The problem we have, the Dodges are so reasonably priced that, I mean, it's a no-brainer, but the problem is, 2 of them are out of service right now. And the problem we have here is we take it to the local Dodge dealer, and it's a warranty type thing, and they have one mechanic that's authorized to do warranty work, and he's off on a medical leave for 4 months. So we drive the car over and let it sit over in Elizabeth City for 3 weeks waiting for it to get fixed. So those are the reasons we need the spare cars. The other one has some other mechanical issues with it. So when we go to rotate cars out, the problem we had when I first got here is they were purchasing 4 and 5 cars at a time, and that made no sense to me. And when they bought a brand new car, they would buy everything brand new in the car. Well, what I have tried to do is get us onto a rotating basis of 2 cars per year. And the equipment eventually would become newer equipment that we could switch out and put into the new cars. And that would save us a considerable amount of money as well. So when we look at rotating cars out of service, it's not always just the miles. What you have to understand is the mileage on a police car is a lot different than on your own personal car. These cars are run, 12 hours a day, and they're sitting in traffic. It's a lot of on and off, and we don't have a lot of the highway to patrol, so we're at a lot of slower speeds and those types of things. So when we get 100,000 miles, it's closer to probably 150 or 160,000 miles compared to a personal vehicle. So a lot of times we'll look at not only that, but when it gets to the point that it's costing me more to maintain this car and keep it on the road, it just makes no sense to keep it any longer.
What is the order do they have? I'm not familiar with the automobile world, but do they have like a police car package?
Yes, these are all police car packages. They're all state bid, state contracts. Yeah, and there's different packages you can purchase. One of the problems we're having right now is that the new 4-wheel drive Tahoes that they have come out with is now a new police package, but they haven't given us a price on it yet, so we're not sure we're gonna purchase it depending on the price. A lot of the new Chevrolet police vehicles that are on the market I can't justify purchasing because they're $4,000 or $5,000 more than what I can pay for a Dodge right now. But at the same time, I got 2 Dodges out of service right now too, so it's
Kind of a catch-22.
that's correct.
Problem, I have a challenge there with that dealer, we have one person that.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'd be looking at that for future purchases, it may cost a little more for Chevrolet. Can they service it quicker and better for you?
I agree.
And, I can't blame Dodge on that dealer for, that's really exposed.
Yeah, we've had some other issues with them too.
I also noticed that you have 2 cars down here with the same officer's name, one of them being spare and one,
Yeah, one is on light duty work right now, so he's driving a spare. He's not in uniform and he's not working, so he's driving
so
an
you don't want him in a marked car?
No.
The issue with the laptop maintenance, is it a communications thing, not being able to maintain a link, or?
I think it's an IT issue, to be perfectly honest with you, but we won't know until we contact a couple of other agencies. But the only 2 agencies that are having this problem right now both have the same IT company. So I'm just gonna verify that
Could be a brand, or,
we've never had a problem with the Dell. Everybody on the beach just about uses the Dell rugged laptops. So I'm not sure. I can tell you that one of the reasons the costs are so expensive is that when there is a problem with our laptops, a lot of times instead of trying to figure out what the problem is, they just wipe the laptop. And that takes a good 4 or 5 hours just to wipe it and then load everything back on. And so there's some other issues too that Peter and I are working on. So we're still trying to pinpoint what the actual issues are.
I think on the ground with the police department, and I'm just getting into it because of the cost, the astronomical cost that we've been shown that we going to be facing for the year. But like the chief said, there's an issue with connectivity with the county system, apparently, that has been explained to me so far as a software issue on the other end, which I've not verified or been unable to verify. And then there's an issue with the actual equipment staying operational, and which has been explained to me as a brand problem, which I've been unable to verify. So we're still, like the chief said, we're still trying to get to the bottom of everything and figure out a solution, a feasible solution to it. But right now, that's our worst case scenario for the cost, but unfortunately. But we are in the middle of trying to figure it all out.
was that originally a group of laptops that we purchased, like maybe 7 at a time or something like that?
No, we've gotten, since I've been here, we've gotten on a rotating basis with those as well. Almost all of our laptops are less than 3-4 years old. Some of the ones that are having problem are some of the newer ones. And we're not having hardware failure, so it's not a Dell issue as far as I'm concerned. It's software, and a lot of the software everybody on the beach is using. But we seem to be having more problems than others, so that's what we're trying to verify is who
Thank
the
you.
problem really is.
So you're saying two groups are using one IT group, and the rest are using somebody else?
Well, some of the other municipalities are fortunate enough to have their own IT, so that makes a difference too.
If there are any other questions for Chief Cole and the departmental budget?
My only comment would be, I would like to see us make a concerted effort, as we are doing, I think, to look at this vehicle usage and vehicle cost and how we can, if we can eliminate a vehicle or two, we should make an effort to do that. If we feel we cannot, absolutely can't do it, then that's understandable. But if we can find some way, because I hear the same thing Jody hears, we have all these vehicles sitting, not going anywhere. But I understand it. I was in business. I had extra trucks. I had to have them to I had a truck break down.
What you have to understand, 2 cars that are sitting out there, because there's two officers, one is on light duty, so his car's been sitting out here for over 3 months. And the other marked car is because we have assigned another officer to one of the unmarked cars because we're doing some investigation. So you've seen an extra 2 or 3 marked cars that have been sitting out there for 2 or 3 months. It's not that we're not utilizing, but they're using another vehicle at the same time.
Well, what controls me is what Tom just said, is the use of the vehicles. Plus, when I look at the whole budget, your department and one other are the only ones that it went up in price rates. So we just have to make sure we're looking at it as thoroughly in detail as we can as to why.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll go to, page 5, code enforcement and inspection, permitting and inspections. And if Mr. Haskett could come up and join me.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, this is the, on page 5, the code enforcement, permitting and inspections. Mr. Haskett, of course, is director of that department, and the same applies to the top 4 lines, salaries, FICA, group health insurance, employee retirement. You can see those projected figures for the year on the line. Again, on salaries, there's a 2.5% cost of living adjustment projected in that particular line. Contracted services is a reflection of the fact that we have a temporary worker now for the remaining portion of this year. And I believe that reflects her projected cost. Is that correct, Bonnie?
As well as Dare County.
Excuse me, as well as the inspections under contract as well, the building inspector and the fire marshal inspections.
I'm sorry, which line is this under the contract?
Contracted services.
But it's really reduced. How, if we're adding this thing in, how is it reduced?
Well, it looks like a reduction there because basically we have, remember when we did the budget amendment for the temp for that position through June 30? So we're not anticipating having to have that position. So the $16,000 is what it cost us for Dare County to do our inspections.
Fantastic, thank you.
So, and I'm sorry, the FY 13-14 column is what's been increased. That's the budget amendment that she mentioned.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
that makes
That's, I
sense.
think, didn't mean to mislead, but that was what is increased, $31,360 for this current year for the temp.
So, do we pay a flat fee or a per inspection to the county?
It's based on mileage and hours.
Okay, so it's
For
not a flat fee.
building inspections as well as the fire marshal, when he comes, he goes to different businesses and checks for compliance with the fire code.
Okay, thank you.
So the 123,285 would reflect the addition of a new person for this coming year, for 14-15.
That's correct, beginning July 1. It wouldn't be a new position, but it would be the current.
Just a new person, or
A
possibly
person.
Possibly the same person. We don't know who it's going to be, right? We just
Right, we would go through that hiring process after the current person retires,
Right.
which she's given us notice that she will.
Yeah, my only concern was that the 123,285 does reflect.
It does.
That
That is
position.
correct. It reflects 2 positions in his department, Wes and the permit officer position. The only thing that I do want to bring to the council's attention is the employee that has told us that she's retiring June the 1st if there's any vacation time on the books, we are required to pay that out, so that may require me to come to you with a budget amendment. I don't know yet, because she's on medical leave at this time, but, that's the only thing that I can see that would happen. But the salaries are for Wes and the one other position.
Plus their 2.5, including their 2.5.
Yes,
Right, not
yes,
plus.
ma'am.
Right, okay.
On the vacation time, the one thing just for discussion, possibly lap salary could take care of that. So we will be looking at all different options before we have to come back for any kind of budget amendment request on that. Well, I mean, do we have a realistic projection for next year on vacation? Because we need to talk about that.
I mean, that would be in this year.
I understand.
That's what I was telling them, I may have to come for.
Are you talking about,
Year.
okay, to make that clear, that the budget amendment request she's talking about would be for FY 13-14. So continuing down, we have the typical expenses for Mr. Haskett's department: printing, advertising, travel, dues and subscriptions, training, supplies, his vehicle maintenance and repair, and his fuel costs, which are vehicle operations, homeowners recovery fee, flood zone map mailing. The equipment purchase, you can see, is down from last year, because that was the projected for last year was a scanner. And Wes, can you comment on the situation there?
We looked into either purchasing a scanner or hiring some sort of contractor or service that would come in and scan elevation certificates, surveys, things of that nature that were or would boost our CRS rating with the community rating system. And we found that the scanners and equipment that we have in Town Hall now, their leases are set to expire or will come up in January this next fiscal year. So when we get those new scanners and copiers, we'll make sure that they are suitable for scanning and doing this. We can do it in-house. We figured it'd be easier to just save money and do it that way.
I know the flood map mailing is a requirement.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything coming up or being discussed of doing it somehow or other technically different, like an email or some way that would would not require the expense of a paper mailing?
Well, I think that would be a lot easier. Right now, it's just easier to find property owners' contact information via tax bills, tax information. We don't have everyone's email address readily
But
available.
there would be no objection to doing that if we found another way to do it?
I'd have to look
From
in,
the
I'd have to
law?
check into that with emergency management. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's all for CRS. It's not necessarily required. It's something that we do so we can get a discount on
Right,
everyone.
that's
get a
why I said
discount.
it was a requirement, because it
Yes, ma'am.
helps to the discount
Right, right.
process, right?
It would be easier. It would save a lot of time for us especially, but it's just, we just don't
I'm
have.
just wondering how many people get that in their mail and right in the trash. So-
Almost all property owners receive it, and it would be a lot easier to do it that way if we could get all the email addresses.
Well, unfortunately, not everybody's gonna have email either.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a difficult one to.
Yeah, it is, to balance it out.
Correct.
Good, okay.
Uniforms is not projected any expense for the year. Miscellaneous, and Wes, could you give me, the council an example of your miscellaneous expenses? Is that just what comes and goes during the year?
It's sort of a contingency.
Something that comes up that was unanticipated.
He has a lot of supply requests during the year as well. I know that.
Yes, for supplies, for example, the most recent summary of statement of revenues and expenditures for the department, I'm already at 99.46% through that line, so I would be able to pull from miscellaneous should I we need more supplies prior to the end of the year.
I wanted to comment too, we used to have the contingency line like Peter discussed, and that, requires you to come before council, and what we did, and so whenever we moved it to another line, that's why it looks like we haven't had any money in the budget the prior years, but we actually did. It was actually moved into another line. So by naming it miscellaneous, we can actually spend out of that line should something come up. So the money, there has actually been money there in the past, but it was just put to another line item. But this way you'll be able to see it actually being spent from the line.
Makes
if needed.
Land use plan update, of course, we did not do any work on that this year, but I wanted to take this time to make a comment to council. For the last 2 years, Mr. Haskett and I have been discussing the need for a rewrite, edited version of the town code. I think there's no secret, if you sat down and read the town code, there are provisions in that are probably applicable to things that were happening 40 years ago. It does need to be rewritten, and a consumer reading it now would say, gee, do those things really happen? And they don't. A lot of things in there are really not applicable to today's time. What we'd like to do is next budget year, propose in this department the cost for consultation to actually rewrite the town code and put it in updated format. And during the year, we'll be getting some ideas and possibly some proposals from those type of consult companies that do that, and just bring it back to council during the next fiscal year to start discussion on that at least.
You know, there's money, there's a line item, I shouldn't say the money, there's a line item under administration for town code update. Is that just the regular, I mean, how would that differ from what you're talking about in this?
That's the annual
Community code probably.
community code. That's the annual where if y'all the council makes changes to the code during the year, that is inserted and published. So that's really not an update.
That just covers the miscellaneous.
It's basically inserted into community code, so anybody looking online at the town code sees it as updated version.
I would agree with you, that would be fun to get it updated.
We looked at possibly doing it ourselves, but I think it's going to be an overwhelming task to try to bring it up to date, and I think it would serve us well to have a professional to do that.
Having experienced as many years ago going through that almost line by line, and the comparisons and the references from one to another, I totally agree. It would be a mammoth job. But it needs to be done.
Zoning in and of itself could be a large
Exactly.
task as well.
The other question I have, and I don't know if you haven't gotten the line item, is this shows, the very last item shows 35,000 for the bike plan, but the other revenue side says 28,000. What's
It's
the difference?
80/20. It's 80/20 reimbursement, so we have to, remember, we have to show the full expense.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That explains it.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am.
And also, I wanted, Wes, if you could kind of update where we are in that program, and if anything is projected to be carried over, et cetera.
That's going very well, and the third steering committee meeting will be held on May 1st, and the consultant is still in the process of writing the draft plan. So I'm thinking at the steering committee meeting, we will be discussing some of what they've come up with so far. We're looking at a second public workshop in probably late summer, early fall, where the draft plan will be available to the public and folks will be able to provide comment on it. So we're looking for an adoption probably late this year, early next year, which was the anticipated date to begin with. We weren't expecting it to be finished in this fiscal year.
What's the next step after it's adopted? What happens? I've been to one workshop, see all the plans.
Right. The plan will establish recommendations for facilities, policies, programs, and it will be up to the town to take initiative to implement any.
Because I'm thinking, okay, there's going to be a funding requirement in there somewhere.
There will be recommendations, for example, if they recommend certain facilities in town, like on South Dogwood Trail, East Dogwood Trail, there certainly would be funding that we would have to look into from other sources or however, but it would be a tool that we could use to help get funding for these recommendations should we want to pursue them.
I'm also anticipating in my mind that when we see the recommendation, it would somehow they're tied into road maintenance in some locations. That maybe as we're reworking a road, that's when you include the bike path recommendations, rather than doing them as two separate steps. So I think it's going to be very complicated as we look at it then how we phase it in, but big issues.
There will be, they recommend that we do establish some form of committee to go over implementation of the plan, so we will try to get something together. So we meet occasionally to go over what the town could be doing to help implement the plan and look into the recommendations that they make.
Good-sized committee, you have probably, what, 16?
The steering committee right now, yeah, it's a little less than 20, with including staff.
Mr. Haskett's departmental budget is 199,370. Any other questions council may have? Wes, seemed like this question comes up occasionally. Can you comment on the system of us contracting out for building inspections and fire inspections, how that's going?
I've not received any negative feedback, no one complaining, saying that we're not able to provide them the services that they've needed. I think it's going well in both respects, fire as well as building inspections.
Fire inspections is what include the marketplace.
All of the commercial, all the commercial locations.
Bigger ones are this one.
Would like you have the Martin Point ETJ area. He does go up that way frequently. But yes, sir, that does include each and every individual storefront in all three of the shopping centers.
It also includes the country club and the association-owned marinas.
Finally, one of the other that he does get involved with is the issuance of permits for large tents. For example, the Southern Shores Realty tent that's out here now, they do have to obtain permission. They do have to get a permit from us, and the fire marshal does review a plan and has to receive certificates, fire rating certificates, and he goes out and inspects them prior to the event. So he is involved in that as well.
My personal measure and how it's going is I have not heard one single negative in the last couple of years, where before I'd hear all kinds, they didn't show up, or they were wrong, or they were late, or they were rude, or they were this, or they were that, but this, I've not heard one.
You're talking about the inspections part of it? Yeah, I say the same thing. I want to commend you, Wes, for the job you do for our town. It's, I get much positive feedback from people that you've dealt with and helped out or told them what they could and couldn't do, but you do it in a way they don't take offense if they're trying to put something where they shouldn't put it or build something where they shouldn't build it. You just do a good job, really good job, a terrific job for us, and I thank you.
Thank you.
I agree
Thank
with
you.
that.
Any other questions for this departmental budget? Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we will go through the various budgets of Ms. Patrick's, the Public Works Director. And I think we need to go to page 8 first, which is actual Public Works Department, and then we'll come back to streets and our other budgets. But if we can go to page 8 first. The first 4 lines on the right column there reflect Rachel's salaries and benefits for her department. Of course, it is the Public Works Director, the Public Works Supervisor, and 2 of the Public Works techs. And the salaries, Social Security, group health insurance, employee retirement lines. You can see next are training, travel. In engineering, she has chose to remove that from this particular budget. Uniforms, dues
Can I
and...
ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no problem with removing it, just want to understand it. We added it last year from the standpoint of saying there are certain things that maybe you'd have to go directly to the engineers. How is that covered? Why is it not?
It's covered under the streets budget.
I suspected that. In fact, my question I wrote here, is it placed elsewhere?
Yeah, and the projects, and it's project specific now, the
Okay.
engineering.
It's not, I think there was a question before as to whether there were maybe some miscellaneous, I hate to use that word, engineering requests that you may have to have, and you're saying that.
And she did put a minimal amount in the streets budget for that.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
We do get some minimal things we need to do, but they're mostly related to streets.
great,
So-
okay.
And I will comment as well, as we had this discussion when this position was developed, the overall engineering expense is down considerably because of some of the administrative matters that the engineering contractor would perform. Now they're picked up by our in-house director, so
Good.
that's nice.
It is.
Uniforms, dues and subscriptions, supplies, safety compliance, town buildings, maintenance and repairs. And Rachel, I'll stop on that one if we could, and you could just comment on that one if you could with some specifics.
Okay, the increase there comes from $5,000 for some painting work needed to be done in all the town buildings. $4,000 for lighting improvements in this building, the Pitt Center. $20,000 for a new telephone system for all of the town hall buildings. $18,500 for the police classroom training building upfit, which includes furniture, whiteboards, AV equipment, gutters, window blinds, and shelving for storage. $5,000 for a retaining wall for the north side of the classroom training building. $9,000 for an electronic security gate for the public workshop. $1,300 for flags, and $5,000 for miscellaneous. And I think the flags budget used to be
Yes,
in the administration,
that's correct.
and we've changed that to put it into my budget.
That's the flags we fly out here,
Yes,
the United States flag and the town flag and the state
Yes.
flag, okay.
yes.
Rachel, can you continue on with the next two lines too? Just explain your lines, individual lines for green initiative and then beautification for the grounds.
So the green initiative, I'm requesting $4,000 for LED lighting improvements in the town buildings. Jason Sawyer, the maintenance supervisor, has an interest in sustainability, and I'd like to support that and at the same time make the buildings more energy efficient. So that's a way that he has thought of to do that. And beautification has gone up $1,500 to establish landscaping at the new police classroom training building. And the $8,000 was requested last year.
And that, we used the 8,000 last year, and
We've used most of it, and we will use the remaining before July 1.
do you feel this is an adequate amount of money for that particular, not just specifically for one building or one street, but for overall? Do you feel like that's enough money we're allocating for beautification?
I think it's adequate for the beautification that we're doing now. If we wanted to establish additional areas to beautify, new areas, I think we would need to increase that.
Let's go through then what areas we are doing right now. if you
Okay.
could.
We're doing all of the town hall buildings. Generally, we do, just maintain the lawn areas. We do flowers in the spring.
Seasonal color, right, right.
Yep. We do the town parking lot over at Chickahawk. We do several medians in town, the median at East Dogwood, the median at Duckwoods Drive, and the median at South Dogwood. And we are actually getting ready to make some improvements on all those medians. And those are the main areas that we do around town.
You reminded me of something from the past, and that was on Fairway Drive, and I know that's one of the roads you want to look on, but in that medium, there used to be a lot more trees and bushes.
Yes.
And one of the homeowners kind of like, is that in your plans anywhere?
That street is actually up for reconstruction next
Right.
year.
I saw that.
And we may be eliminating that median. We've been doing
Eliminating,
minimal work to
okay.
it because that will be affected in this upcoming
Okay.
project.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just finish out and we can go back to any individual line. Equipment lease and maintenance, vehicle maintenance and repair, vehicle operations, which again is fuel.
Yes, that has gone up slightly due to fuel costs, but more so because of the flail mower that was purchased last year for trimming the right-of-ways. That uses quite a bit of diesel fuel. Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, somebody. The next two lines, I'm gonna get Rachel to comment on. We're projecting for that department, capital outlay for equipment and capital outlay for a new vehicle.
So the capital outlay equipment is for the purchase of a new small tractor. The tractor with the flail mower is new and it's working well, but we have a second small compact tractor that we use for quite a bit of maintenance around town that has been failing of recent, and we do need a new one badly. The capital outlay vehicles, we've requested to purchase a new truck for Public Works. The truck being driven by Harold Herndon, is over 10 years old and needed several repairs last year to the tune of a few $1,000s, and now we have some mechanical issues with it, needing more repairs this year, which we haven't done yet. So just being over 10 years old, we just see that it is now sort of time to replace it.
This $22,000 reflects the cost of the truck less less our trade-in. Is that the idea?
What we normally do is we'll sell that vehicle. So we'll surplus that vehicle, and then that will go back in the budget. So we normally don't trade our vehicles. We normally, sell them on
Surplus,
gov deals
okay.
and surplus them. Yes, sir.
So the $22,000 is for the purchase of a new truck at state contract price.
Okay, thank you.
The smaller compact tractor, how old is it?
Let's see, I don't know that we have the year, but it has 2,860 hours.
And if you could drop down again to equipment purchase, that projection is $15,650 for the year.
Yes.
Kind of go through that.
That, we're requesting $7,800 for the purchase of a new mower to replace one of our existing mowers that is also failing. It is actually not working right now, so we are down to one mower. $800 for a new energy-efficient refrigerator for the public workshop. Their refrigerator, I think, is from the 60s, and it is it is an energy hog.
Maybe early 70s.
Maybe.
I've been there.
$3,750 for a skid sprayer and $500 for a tank. That would be for watering lawns and spraying pesticides and brine for the town hall complex and the cemetery. And $800 for a pneumatic grease gun and $2,000 for miscellaneous.
And then we come to sand fencing and grass planting. That reflects the $24,000 that you show the revenue for from the county for the occupancy, beach stabilization that we would spend during the fiscal year, as is now required by county policy. And also parking lot maintenance, this is flat from last year, bringing a total of $503,987 for this particular budget for the year.
The parking lot, does that include all the little parking places along the streets, or is that the major parking lot?
It does. It includes the beach parking as well.
Invite any questions council may have of this
I don't have a
budget.
question really for the budget at all, although it affects, it's a wider question. And that is, you've been here less than a year yet.
Yes.
And every year, again, when we go into this budget process, we've always had the discussion is, what is your motivation? Do you want to just do mowing? Do you want to do this? How do you see this Public Works Department playing out? What your wishes are for it, what you think is how we should be going?
Well, I think our goal is definitely to keep the town not only safe, but beautiful. You know, beautification is important to us. I just need folks to remember that we are a small group. We're trying to stay small, and as we add more and more to that, you know, we may need more labor. So we just need to think about, you know, if we continue to add to the beautification of the town, we have to think about the operation side of that as well. But as far as, you know, goals of the department, I would say beautification, definitely to make the buildings as efficient as possible, energy efficient, water efficient, and that sort of thing. Jason is definitely has an interest in that, and I want to support that and help him learn from that and grow in that way.
One of the discussions related to this has also been around contracting it out versus doing it. And I gather from what you're saying, and especially looking at the equipment, that you're feeling that we have better control if we do it as opposed to depending on a contractor to meet our needs.
We
quote
do,
unquote.
with certain things especially. I think some of our contracts, though, especially our limb and branch removal contract, works very well for the town to have that service contracted out. That would be a huge undertaking for the town to do in-house.
And a big capital investment if we had to do
Yes,
that. I mean, so
absolutely,
it's
yeah.
weighing the difference. No. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it.
I would, before we move on to streets, bridges, and canals, invite council at any time to continue with ideas for, new initiatives. As Rachel said, the bottom line, it will be an added expense to the department if we take on new initiatives, but I think we keep hearing beautification, and if we want to do some new things, we certainly need to sit down and talk about it and project the cost for them, is her message, because certainly that's something we always get. We want our town to be beautiful, and we try within our means as best we can to do that, and we are a maritime forest. Grass doesn't necessarily grow in the shade without constant watering, and so that's our challenge, I think, with some of the areas that people have brought to our attention.
I think we have to concentrate on those focal points people see when they come into town, the streets that are the most heavily used, things like that, and areas we can do something. We can't do much on Highway 12 because it doesn't belong to us. But Dogwood Trail and Fairway Drive and Duckwoods Drive are streets that belong to us, and we can do things to really, our entrance sign, our cemetery sign, we can do things that make people know that we have interest in town being a beautiful place to visit or to stay. I think people appreciate it. I think sometimes people tend to think, well, they did something for me, someone else did do something for me type thing, and it gets to be a little bit of a selfish motivation sometimes. But I think it's important that we stay focused on the fact that we want this to continue to be a great place to live and visit, and part of that is having seasonal color and things that people see and appreciate. Makes a huge difference. It's a,
It gives the image that, we're running a livable and maintained neighborhood.
we care about it.
Specifically, if you got a potential home buyer, that's one of the things they're gonna look at.
That's exactly right. And I think you're doing a great job for us, by the way, too. I'll echo what I said to Wes.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased with the way things are going.
Thank you, Tom.
Rachel's next budget is page 7. If we could go to streets, bridges, and canals, and recall that this is set up as a separate department that is administered by Public Works. And Rachel, I'm gonna be calling on you just about on every line if you can
Okay.
explain, but the street sign maintenance, the way this has been explained to council in the past is this is a multi-year phase type project. Is that?
That's correct. Jason has been updating the town signs to the current MUTCD standards, and he continues to do that. So I'm requesting the $12,500 that was requested last year, and an additional $2,278 for 8 new high water signs with stands and storage bags that were requested by the police department. They currently have high water signs, and I believe they are quite old and sort of starting to not be stable when they're put up. So they have asked for new signs there.
Since it's a critical part of our stormwater management program, I think we need to go ahead and invest the money in that.
One comment on that too. I believe in the past it's pointed out to us that some signs have gotten dirty. I don't think some mold had grown on a couple. We certainly clean those and invite anybody to comment back that if they're anywhere need to clean.
That was a victim of a conversation.
Engineering services, that's Rachel's projection for engineering for minor street repair, if we need to call on the engineer for opinion, comment, et cetera, on minor.
Correct, or if we have a small stormwater issue that we can solve in-house with maybe a small swale or something like that, but we want the engineer's opinion.
The next line is street maintenance, and you recall that council last year began this program, and we actually had a budget amendment during the year to increase that amount significantly during this current year, for items that could be handled by the Public Works Department through minor purchase order type contracts, and that's what we've been doing as far as patching potholes constantly. $50,000 of this amount represents what the Capital Improvement Planning Committee recommended to put into this budget, and I believe $3,000 is for something else.
It's for
products.
Patching products that are used by the public works staff for very minor potholes.
So I think it's important probably for Rachel, if you could comment on this and kind of give up to council a little bit idea about the frequency. I don't think any of this money would be left over, in other words, at the end of the year.
Absolutely not. We are anticipating spending, you can see 70,000 on minor potholes this year, and that is both within Public Works and small contracts. Everything from asphalt failure to edge failures, root upheavals and that sort of thing. We have a small contractor we're working with. And I just feel that making these minor repairs helps us maintain those roads so that they can last a little bit longer until we have a major reconstruction project.
Makes sense.
Brush trimming, again, this is for extra tree trimming in street right-of-ways that we need to call on our contractor for, as well as in the cemetery and other town-owned properties. We find ourselves calling on him during the year on matters that we can't get to, either due to height or the volume of the work, et cetera. And that's for that type of work.
And that could be for a dead tree, a diseased tree, just a tree that's fallen over or about to fall over, might be dangerous, that sort of thing.
Next item is bridge maintenance, and that covers the cost of inspections annually as well.
Or any repairs that may be needed due to those inspections.
The next dozen or so lines show the streets that have been done in the past, and they're carried because they were 2 or 3 years out on the budget. They're carried for auditing purposes. You can see there's nothing being projected for those. So if you go all the way down to beginning with Fairway Drive through Yopon Lane, those particular streets are the recommendations of Council's Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Fairway Drive, North Dogwood Trail from house number 280 to house number 293, Pintail Court, Scuppernong Lane, the north, south, and east Dogwood Trail intersection, Yopon Lane being the last one. And these are major capital improvements to the streets. And we can go down and individually go through them if you like and describe the projected work. Why don't we do that, Rachel, if you could, just
Could I ask you
comment.
a general
Yes,
question
ma'am.
first? Several years ago, we increased the tax to say 3 cents should go to capital projects. And I remember during the reevaluation discussion, you said that 3 cents would equate to something different under the new tax rate, but I don't remember what that was. Can you tell me what that number was?
Because a penny now.
Yes, 126.
Yeah, so it's a little over 4 cents now. It gives you 516,000, which was equivalent to 3 cents when we first.
516,000, okay, that's what it's converting there to. Yeah, a little over 4, yeah.
A little over 4.
Right.
We're going over 4 though, with that projection.
Yeah, because we're basing it on the amount of money we committed to it rather than the actual cents rates, but that helps me in my.
Yeah, and these just, of course, these are the capital costs for those streets. That doesn't include the $53,000 pothole money street
Correct.
townwide that she's projected.
Okay, thank you.
So, Public Works developed a long list of streets that need to undergo a reconstruction project. And the 6 that are in the current budget request are the 6 that rose to the top as needing repairs the soonest. Fairway Drive, we're proposing reconstructing the entire road. That is the town-owned portion of the road. That street has asphalt failure. There are large roots undermining the road there, and so that will need to include tree removal. At North Dogwood Trail, number 280 to 293, that is approximately 500 feet of alligator cracking, potholes, and block cracking. Pintail Court, we're proposing doing the entire road with asphalt and subgrade, and I believe that was on the list, the previous list from last year to be done for this year. Scuppernong Lane, we're also proposing doing the entire road and creating a cul-de-sac on that road to allow for emergency vehicles to turn around in a safer way. North, south, and east Dogwood, the intersection there has asphalt failure, needs to be rebuilt. And Yopon Trail, the entire road, we're proposing to rebuild and possibly widen. Obviously, the engineer would need to look at that right away and that sort of thing. But that road has asphalt failure, edge failure, and roots undermining the road.
This road, Yopon Lane, was kind of a toss-up between Yopon Lane and Beech Tree, as I
Yes.
recall. And I suggested in our last CIP, or one of our earlier CIP meetings, that we consider Yopon and put it further up the list. I'd like to make sure that the council is okay with that, because Beech Tree is more heavily used and has more residents. Don't know what I think the relative cost to do Beech Tree is a little bit lower, but I just want to make sure that everybody's okay with it, or if you have thoughts about going back and taking care of Beech Tree first, it's just a question of which one we do first. Both of them need to be done, but.
And I'll say, I think Yopon is in a little bit worse condition, but Tom is right in that Beech Tree is more heavily traveled.
Yeah, Yopon's definitely in worse condition, and not quite as easily accessed for emergency vehicles, but I don't want, because I said it should be done, that we just jump on Yopon Lane. I think if it needs to be discussed, we should discuss it now, because I don't want people from Beech Tree attacking any of us.
I have two comments. Yopon, not only that, as you say, needs to be widened. So I think from a safety point of view, it's a little bit more treacherous, especially somebody that happens to be back there and doesn't know where they're going or what they're doing, and at night
Right.
can be a problem. The other one on Beech Tree, you say already designed. We did have a plan for doing all of Beech Tree Trail a couple years ago, and the citizens said, don't touch this area. Is this the area that they said don't touch?
Yes,
Yes.
well,
I'm sorry.
a couple of citizens,
Well, right after it was built, they turned around and said, oh, we should have done that.
yes.
But it was a terrible issue at the time that
It
was
was a
going on.
tree and straightening problem.
Exactly.
That's what it
Cutting out the
amounted
curb,
to.
Exactly. So,
They
I
didn't
know a
want the
couple of
trees
you
cut
live
down.
on Beech Tree, I'm gonna not say anything further.
Have we heard anything from the residents on Yopon?
I have gotten some complaints from 2 residents on Yopon
About the work we're thinking about doing, or the work that needs to be done?
about the asphalt failure and
Yeah.
the rough nature of the road.
One caveat to that is we have, the widening portion would need to be heavily discussed, obviously, if we got into that. That's why she alluded to the engineer looking at that, and widening has not been discussed yet with residents.
But then there's not much side on the canal side to go, so we know where that means to go.
That's why we need to talk to the engineer. There's
Exactly.
a lot of utilities on the west side of the road down there.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a cumbersome job either way, I think. It's also gonna be a little bit cumbersome if we went back to try to do Beech Tree with the entrance there being the way it is, and the little dog leg we may not even need. It's just,
Originally, it
The
was,
original engineering would have straightened that out.
yes, we've taken that out.
That's, the edge, where that turns in right now, the edge of the right-of-way is the edge of the asphalt on the west side.
That does encroach a little bit on property at the end of Beech Tree, as I understand it. That is, the town's pavement goes onto the citizens' property
on the west side of the east side.
on the west side.
Beyond the right-of-way.
As you turn in, the house that's immediately on that corner,
Mike Estrela's house.
yes, that's where the encroachment is. And the part of the problem was back then that people didn't want to straighten the road out. They didn't want certain trees removed. They didn't understand the swale process that would be used and didn't want ditches in their front yards, that type of thing. It was very vocal. But I believe now that the town has demonstrated that we have a standard, that we follow through, that we have accommodated things for additional engineering for utilities, that, and given the current condition right now, I don't believe there'll be as much objection to having the work done. But from a safety standpoint, there's nothing about that road that inhibits the safety of things like emergency vehicles coming in and out, turning, or whatever. So when you have to weigh that against another area of the town where that is a problem, and I know from experience having driven a fire truck all the way to the end of that street and then trying to get it back out.
On Yopon.
Oh, yeah.
I wanna do that.
And that was before a lot of the edge failures and things that are going on now. So it's somewhat of a quandary, but I think we probably need to leave things the way they are now, especially if we can now see that there's daylight for down the road and in a more near-term period for Beech Tree.
It should move to the top of the list, if I'm not mistaken, for the next cycle.
Yopon?
But,
I'm sorry, Beech Tree.
Yeah.
Oh, for the next cycle, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, going back to what you're saying, David, I think the last 3 years especially, we've established ourselves with some credibility. We commit to do something that turns out to be a pretty good job for everybody concerned, the residents as well as users. And I think that's maybe a problem we were having before that time, which now we've apparently corrected. So I think when you establish credibility and then you're going to start and finish something and it's going to be better than it was, usually people are more inclined to let you do the next project you want to do. So hopefully we've established that some level of credibility, which we didn't have 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, if I comment on that, tab 5 in your book does show what capital improvement planning committee proposed for this year as a priority, which we just went over. And also it's got the future project pool, and that shows you right at the top of the list is Beech Tree.
That's what I was just
So,
alluding to.
it is put in listing of priority, but I have every reason to believe all these are going to be under contract just as quick as possible based on Rachel's departments, the way they do things. So they're going to happen during the year, and then we'll just pick right up next year, and capital improvement planning committee will pick these up and propose them. I have every confidence Beech Tree will be right at the top of the list for next year. So.
Where do we stand on the Duckwoods Drive piece that we didn't do last year? And is that,
That's under construction now.
it's
Right.
under construction now?
It
I
is.
haven't driven back that street recently, okay.
It'll be finished by June 13th.
By June 13th, good.
So we'll, if it's consensus of council, we'll leave these just like they are in this projected budget. And of course, we've got several more meetings to adopt, and continue to think about it.
Are we all pretty much in agreement with that we leave it like it is for right
Yes.
now? The only other comment I would like to, question I'd like to ask is that I know we've been very lucky or very fortunate in that a lot of our projects have come in a little underestimated cost. Once it's bid and you get the bid price, it's not going to change, but up to that time, you still have the opportunity for it to come in under projected cost. Is that money then being reapplied to additional streets or just being held in reserve to use on additional streets? How do we handle that?
Well, up until in the past, we've handled it in the fact that it was in capital reserve fund, and we had council reallocate that to other streets during the year. Now, of course, we all putting them in the general fund budget like we've got. And if there is savings, it would be in that department. And it is our intent for Rachel to be able to take that same money and to continue on with what she feels like needs to be addressed in that department for the year. However, if there's significant savings like we have had in the last 24 months, I feel confident we will look at doing other streets, obviously. Or if there's pressing pothole needs on top of the 53,000, we could put it toward that. But if it's significant, we could certainly look at other streets at the top of the list, and we could just move that up and during the current fiscal year.
Correct, and I just want to clarify, some of those pothole needs are actually relatively large for a minor project. They can be 100 to 200 feet long.
Almost like a rebuild, actually.
Yes, but still considered a minor rebuild, yes.
From a fiscal standpoint, what we're trying to do, of course, is keep them minor fiscally so that we won't have to go out for formal bids, but we're certainly doing that if we have to, if they become large enough.
We said that we can't do anything with NC-12 because it's not ours. Has there been any recent discussion with DOT? I mean,
Yes.
I drove down there this morning, the 4th and 5th Avenue was awful. I mean, it was really flooded. Yeah.
We actually met with DOT yesterday, a fresh meeting, and Mayor Bennett, I'll defer to you
Yes.
if you want to comment on that.
It is fresh.
We discussed, good meeting, actually, for me, because I hadn't met these people before and didn't know them and didn't know what the rules were. It was pretty interesting. They were candid, they were honest about our needs, and the issue, this came about because I had asked Peter to arrange a meeting because I had comments from the CPOA membership meeting about some of the issues at Duckwoods Drive with Highway 12. The issue, one of the primary issues was discussed was stormwater management. What's happening with that? Can we fix it? The impression I got was that there aren't funds in their budget, the district budget or the state budget, to address stormwater as a specific thing they would deal with. You'd have to have some other overriding consideration that was maybe the street was to be widened, the road was to be improved in some other way before they'd address it. The only possibility where they would address a stormwater issue would be if you could document a history of injuries or accidents caused by that situation. A bad enough flooding where cars were being submerged or people were being injured because of it. And if you can't document that, they won't look at it as something they want to fund. The other concern was the crossovers. A number of residents had asked to have them lighted like they are in some areas of the county. Some parts of Highway 12 where they have a flashing light that shows you there's a crossover there. They're not in favor of those for a number of reasons. I talked to Larry about it. Larry heard this last night, but the state's position is that the lighted flashers are high maintenance. They cost a lot of money to maintain, take a lot of time to maintain. They're high dollar to start with. Number two, they can be a distraction at night for drivers because it's, especially on a straight stretch of road where you can see 4 or 5 of them in a row, it can be quite a distraction. Take your eye off the road to watch the flashing light. And the third thing I thought was interesting was there was no significant statistical evidence that the flashing light crossovers are safer than the plain crossovers or crossovers with signs. There's no direct correlation between more or fewer accidents. They can't statistically say one's better than the other. So those things made us, I just kind of backed away from that. I explained that partly last night. I'm gonna contact Jim and Carlos and explain to him some of the things I left out of last night's conversation with this SSCA. The third area was speed limit. And the speed limit issue is one where people have advocated before. Some of our citizens have wanted to see us slow the speed limit on Highway 12 to 35 or even 25 in the summertime. And they weren't against that. I didn't think. They weren't necessarily jumping up and down that we wanted to do it, but they weren't against it. They would cooperate with us, but they said, don't forget, you're going to live with it. If you ask for 35 and we agree to make it 35, it may be 35 year round. In other words, we may not want to come back and change it twice a year to accommodate a difference in speed limit. The other thing is you have to think about is the unintended consequences of having that speed limit out there on Highway 12, 25 or 35. All of a sudden, you have an LSV access route, an LSV road they can use. So you're going to have low-speed vehicles out there year-round on that road, which I'm not sure we want that. At least I don't think all of us want that. So there's 3 or 4 things you have to weigh very carefully when you start to ask for something. The overall meeting was good. I felt it was. I didn't hear what I wanted to hear in every case, but it was a positive meeting. I feel like I'm better informed and better feel more comfortable dealing with questions I get from the public about it. And that's the update. I'm sorry it takes so long with it, but
No, it's good.
if you want to add something, Peter, you should do so.
I think what I took away from the meeting is I'll have discussions with our engineer to revisit possibly at least costing some of the improvements that we had discussed 2 and 3 years ago on behalf of the town. As to, I know council didn't discuss them, but at the staff level, we did with DOT as far as pricing out some of the remedies for NC-12 based on the stormwater study. And at the time we costed them 2 or 3 years ago, it was in the sense of we would hopefully be able to partner with DOT. That's drastically changed now with the new system in Raleigh. That money's no longer available. So basically what I took away is if something's going to be done, Town of Southern Shores has got to do it itself. DOT would approve the engineering. So that's what we're looking at. Whether or not we could afford that in those 4 or 5 hot spots is the question. And we'll have some discussions with the engineer. We're looking at some high dollar changes as well as possible right-of-way acquisition in at least 2 of those locations, which that I'm sure that go over too well, but that's the problem with two of those locations that I know of from firsthand account.
Any idea what the solution is? Can we rebuild the road and raise the road?
Well, you see,
All their drainage areas?
Duck's solution from its town line up through Tuckahoe was the infiltration piping on one side, and which was a buildup of the road and a buildup of the right-of-way. There's not enough room to do that currently in two locations, so that would have to mean acquiring something, and I don't know if that would work or not, based on the ownership of those lots and the fact that two of them are built on.
That's something we would require, would that be an easement arrangement?
Well, we would acquire an easement or fee, it didn't matter, it'd be the cost is the same. So it's gonna, bottom line, after our meeting yesterday, it's gonna to fix those, it would be a town initiative.
I find it interesting they changed their definition on the stormwater, because before, when we did all those studies with them, it was that they would do it as long as the town fixed what was causing the problem, because they claimed we were causing the problem. But at Fourth and Fifth Avenue, I don't see the town causing that problem as far as a road is concerned.
Yes, and it's all about funding and the new system,
Yeah.
and new system that the General Assembly adopted, no longer there's a TIP, now there's an STI. Stormwater's not part of that. They're leaving stormwater out of that particular, formula.
And I don't see
policy.
our problems matching what you were talking about, whether it was an improvement or, if they're gonna do widening or other kind of improvements, or if the stormwater itself was causing a problem that a car was gonna be underwater. Well, we don't have that
Which,
situation.
you bring up one other point that was discussed. If NC 12 is to be ever widened in the town of Southern Shores, certainly stormwater considerations would be engineered into that widening by DOT.
But that goes back to their whole funding process now, as
Yes.
to whether they'd even consider that.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right, it was Dogwood and Fourth and Fifth Avenue this morning, that was really,
Really bad.
really bad.
And I mentioned the fact that you had to move from the proper lane over to the middle, if you had a middle lane, to be able
Oh,
to
yeah,
go
it's,
through there.
yeah, Dogwood, you were driving into the turning lane.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Peter, because I had not forgotten it, but I didn't put enough emphasis on it, but that was a good point. It was kind of to me, it was kind of a positive, negative, that it kind of balanced each other, almost zeroed each other out, because the positive was they wouldn't object to us doing our own stormwater with their approving the plans, but the negative was you gotta pay for it. And as from what Peter says, and I think we agree, we'd probably eat up a couple of our road building budgets for a couple of years. Say that another way, eat up our road building budget for a couple of years, just to fix maybe one or two stormwater issues. Anyway, thank you.
Just the Tall Pine Bridge line shows 100% of what we project out to be the expense for the year, the 500,000. And we recall previously under revenues, we showed 80% of the match coming back in. Canal dredging project debt payment, that's set each year. I believe that's the second payment that we will be making towards the town's debt for that project. Waterway maintenance and repair. Recall, this is our the town's contribution towards signage and lighting for the outside channel. Storm debris cleanup. I would propose to the council to leave $20,000 in, and recall, this is the money that we use each year for undeclared storms where there's no FEMA money coming back in. In the last couple of years, we've not spent all of it, and we have transferred some of that money to other lines to be used, and I have done that administratively in a couple of cases under your authority of the budget ordinance. But I would like to keep that at $20,000. 3 years ago, we used just about every bit of it for post-storms from Hurricane Earl and Hurricane Irene. So it's always something, it's a contingency item, but I would propose we keep that in there. And that totals out for the year for this particular department of $1,401,507. If there are any other line questions, we'll try to address those.
The debt payment on the canal dredge, is that one payment a year?
Two. So that'll be the second year. We make a payment in, December and June.
So we'll pay that off in 7 years, 5 years?
Yes, sir, 7.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to respectfully request a little brief recess, if you don't mind. Some of us need to run to the... If you,
Your telephone's on the floor.
yes,
Oh, okay.
thank you. It's okay.
Anybody have any problem with a brief recess?
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's keep it informal.
Thank you.
Recess. About 10 minutes be good?
That'd be fine.
Okay.